Have you ever wondered when is it time to actually replace your pressure tank? Have you ever thought about what are some ways that me as a homeowner, I might be able to tell that I have a problem and I need to replace this relatively expensive piece of equipment in my house? Today, I'm gonna give you 3 things to look for so that way you know when it's time to replace your pressure tank. So let's go ahead and get on into it. The first thing we have to discuss is what is a pressure tank. Now, if you've come to this video, I imagine you probably are a well owner. You probably have had some kind of issue with your water system. Maybe you had a plumber show up and say you need to get a new pressure tank, and you're trying to get a little bit more information. But for those of you who may have clicked on this and may not know what a pressure tank is, it's going to be the big blue thing in the basement that supplies pressure to your house. How this works. In the well, you're going to have a pump. That pump is going to push the water up and into your house, and it's going to store that energy in the pressure tank. The top part's air, there's a bladder, and then the bottom part is water. They work together in order to give you water at the tap without having to run the pump continuously. Pressure tanks will come in a variety of sizes, and sometimes they'll come in a variety of shapes. Sometimes you'll get little stubby ones, sometimes you'll get real tall skinny ones, sometimes you'll get really big fat ones. It just depends on your specific needs and the yield of your well. Additionally, the reserve in the well itself. That's a conversation for a different day, so let's get back to the matter at hand. How do you know when it's time to replace your tank? The very first thing you need to look at is the condition of your tank. Is it rusted? Is it gnarly? Is it leaking? If it's leaking, if it's gnarly, it's done. It's time to replace it. The very first thing you need to look at for your tank is very simple. It's, do you have any pressure irregularities in your home? What do I mean by that? I mean, if you turn on the tap and you're running it for a little bit and the water's kind of pulsating where it'll speed up and then it'll slow down, it'll speed up and then slow down, that usually means you've got something going on with the bladder in your pressure tank and you're not getting even disbursement of the water pressure. Could also be an issue with the faucet itself, but that's your first thing to be like, maybe I've got a problem. I might need to look into it. Most people don't see this when they're washing dishes. It'll almost always, for some reason, be when they're taking a shower. When they're taking a shower, they might notice it more often. I think the reason for this is because when you're showering, you're not really, like, your mind's kind of not on something, right? You're in the shower cleaning yourself up, you're not doing the dishes, you're not doing a task, you're not really thinking about what's directly in front of you, what do you have to do, and so you start to notice these pressure irregularities. You'll notice it just doesn't quite feel like it used to feel, and at that point you got to go downstairs, and that's what leads us to option 2. If you're in the basement and you're running water and you hear the pressure switch click on and then click off, and it's like 5 to 10 seconds between first click, second click, that's too fast. Now, what do we call that? We call that a short cycle. A short cycle is any time that you are less than 60 seconds, but it really becomes a problem when you're in that sub 20, sub 30 second range. Depends on what your use case is, but like once you start getting less than 20 seconds for the runtime, now we're starting to get into a little bit more of a hairy situation. Where does that number come from? That number comes from most of the manufacturers, like Amtrol, Gould's, all of those companies. They'll tell you that they want to see a 60-second runtime from first click, second click. And so with that, you actually have charts and you can do the math to figure out what size tank you need. In our area, most of the guys are just gonna throw in a 30-gallon tank, maybe a 20-gallon tank if you're in Southern Maryland and you gotta stick it under the house. But most of the time, you're gonna see a smaller tank than you need, and that's kind of why when you're between 30 and 60 seconds, okay, is it great? No, but it's still not short-cycled enough to be a problem. When you have these systems running, you want to have that 60-second run time to give the pump adequate time to cool down. What burns the pump up is the on-off. So if you're running it in a short, just back, it'll cause additional wear and tear on the pump, and eventually that pump will no longer be able to function correctly. You have a limited amount of start and stops, essentially. When you think about your equipment and the motor, if you're constantly having it turn on and turn off and every 5-10 seconds and you take a 20-minute shower, guess what? That's a lot of start stops where that 30-year pump might only last 2. On a lot of water systems, you're lucky to see 7 to 10 years nowadays. A lot of times you're not gonna end up having it last 30 years. Those systems tended to be from the 80s and 90s. They, for whatever reason, I guess, did a better job, better manufacturing, maybe better rules, I don't know, but the 80s and 90s, those ones tended to last a lot longer. Those are the ones I'm starting to replace now. But I'm also replacing a lot of the ones that were installed 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The early 2000s, for whatever reason, a lot of the systems did not seem to be producing quite the same results, and we had a lot of problems. A short cycle is incredibly problematic because it stresses out your system. As a homeowner, how you can check is you need to go downstairs to your pressure tank and you're gonna find a little gray box. Sometimes they're black, but usually they're gray. In that box is going to be your pressure switch itself. Don't touch it while it's live. It could hurt you, right? It's going to have appliance grade voltage most of the time, or it'll at least have the outlet voltage, and neither one's fun to touch. Don't touch it. But you go down and you listen. You watch it. You get a stopwatch on your phone, and you leave a utility sink running, a bathtub. You leave something in the house running, and then you wait till you hear the first click. Start the stopwatch. Wait a few seconds. You'll hear another click. When you hear that next click, stop the stopwatch. See what does it say. If it says 5-10 seconds, you've got a problem. If you're in the 30 to 40 seconds, not great. If you're above 60 seconds, it's okay. You might just have an undersized pump for the size of a pressure tank you have, or maybe your yield's just not quite as good depending on what your usage was. The next step that you're gonna do is you're gonna hook a hose to that pressure tank. And when you hook a hose to that pressure tank, you're gonna put it in a sump pump, you're gonna find a sink. Maybe if there's neither of those options, you run it outside. And then you're gonna turn the water to the house off. And the reason you wanna do this is you don't want a leaking toilet or somebody accidentally running something and messing up this next test. What you're gonna do is you're going to turn on that spigot at the pressure tank, run all that water outside into the sump pump, wherever. You're gonna pick a spot, you're gonna run it. You're gonna run it for a little bit, and then as soon as you hear that pressure switch click on, you're gonna close the valve, start the stopwatch, do nothing, you wait. You wait until it clicks again. Once it clicks again, now we're gonna be able to see what our actual result is. Is it the actual pressure tank itself, or is it something else? If the result's low, we've got a problem. So the first thing, like I said, is surging. The second thing is a short cycle. And the very last thing that you need to do is go to the top of the tank. If you go to the top of the pressure tank, you're gonna see a little cap. Unscrew that cap, and you're gonna see a Schrader valve, just like what you'd see on a car tire. You're gonna see a Schrader valve cap, and then you basically are gonna take your finger and you're gonna press on it. If water shoots out of that Schrader valve, the bladder's gone, you're done. If air comes out, you might not be as done as you think you are. That's where now what we need to do is empty the tank. So remember, we already hooked our hose to the pressure tank itself. The reason we hooked that hose up is so that way we can go to the electric panel, turn the power to the well pump off. Remember, the house water is already off, so we've already shut that valve. We go to the electric panel, we turn off the power to that well pump. Hopefully you labeled it. If not, just start working your way down until eventually you find it. You turn that power off. You open up the spigot and you let the thing run until the water stops. At that point, the pressure tank should be empty. The next step is you go over and you gently rock it. If you hear a sloshing sound, you probably have a blown bladder. It depends on whereabout you hear the sloshing sound. If you hear it up high, that means you've got a problem. If you hear it down low, it's probably just depending on your elevation, and you might have a little bit of water sitting in the bottom of it. Depending on the brand of pressure tank you have, you might actually have a steel plate in the middle. When the water goes through the little golf ball size hole, the water gets stuck on the opposite side of that steel plate. So that's why when you shake it, if you hear water up high, more than likely what happened is the bladder that was below that steel plate, it ruptured, split, whatever. The water was able to get up through that golf ball size hole and is now trapped up top. So when you shake it, you can hear that water rattling around when you shouldn't have any water. Over time, the up and down of that bladder is going to cause it to rupture, no matter what you do. Generally speaking, whenever you have these pressure tanks, you should expect them to last kind of like a water heater, 7 to 10 years. They last a lot longer than a well pump, but not by much. If you've done all these tests, and you're seeing that it seems like most of the time you're not passing these tests, it's time to replace your pressure tank. Where I run into a lot of problems is a lot of plumbers will just say, hey, you have an old tank, replace it. It's 20 years old, get rid of it. And I disagree with that. I think that if you have a tank that's functional, you should still continue to use it as long as it's not leaking and as long as it's not broken and it's not waterlogged. Who cares if it's pretty? Who cares how old it is? It's doing what it's supposed to do. Let it keep doing its thing, right? Where I run into a lot of problems, though, is that people are not going to be as straightforward as what I'm trying to be with you right now. This causes a lot of anxiety amongst the public and people who may not be in the trade. The anxiety that I see people have is, am I being ripped off? Because they don't know any better and they don't want to be ripped off. And that's where I wanted to have this conversation with you right now to kind of give you my 2 cents. I'm not making any money off of it. I'm gonna let you go and do the test yourself to see if that pressure tank is gone. So remember, we've got 3 ways to do this. The first way is going to be if you have any surging in the water. The second way is if you take your stopwatch and you can actually measure how long it takes between first and second cycle, right? When it clicks on and when it clicks off, what's the time between the 2 of them? Depending on that answer, kind of depends on what you do next. As a bonus option, if while you're going down there, you see it's all corroded, gnarly, leaking, you may as well just replace it, no questions asked. You got a problem, get rid of it. I usually see that be the case if the pressure tank's underneath of the house. A lot of homeowners don't realize how gnarly and how corrosive it is to be underneath of a home. For many of you though, I'm sure that your pressure tank's in the basement like everybody else, so you probably don't have that problem to think about. Finally, remember, the third thing you can do is you empty the tank, shake it, see what it does, right? If you empty it and there's a bunch of water in the top, it's game over. Additionally, before you empty, you can just leave it full, press the top, and if water shoots out, that answers your question too. There are a lot of plumbers out there that will actually be telling you the truth, and they'll be telling you, yes, you do need to replace your tank. And when they do tell you that, believe them, don't fight them on it, right? But these are things you want to do to double check yourself. Make sure you're not getting ripped off. Make sure that there's not somebody else out there causing problems. I'm a big advocate for it. Get 3 quotes. Ask multiple people for their opinion on it. A lot of contractors, it might be a small fee. They might come out there, take a look at it and say, no, you're fine. Or they might say, yeah, no, you really ought to replace it. Spend that little bit of time, do your homework, ask around. That way you don't end up paying for something that you really don't need to pay for. If you gained any value out of this, if you found this informative in any way, hit that like button. Let me know below, did you do that test? Did you try this yourself before you decided to pull the trigger and get the pressure tank replaced? If you're getting the tank replaced, let me know below also, what kind of brand are you putting in there? Are you putting a Gould's? Are you putting a Well-Extrol? Are you putting a Baron? What type of system are you putting in your house? Because I think it'd be really interesting to let everybody else know what the most popular brand is in your area. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, hit that like button, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.